Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have been selected and sworn as the jury to try the case of State of Florida versus Jane Jones. This is a criminal case. The defendant has been charged with the crime of driving while under the influence of alcoholic beverages to the extent that her normal faculties were impaired. Later, I will instruct you on the elements of this crime. It is your solemn responsibility to determine if the state has proved its accusations against the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt. State, please call your first witness.
Your Honor, State calls Deputy Do-Right.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name for the jury.
My name is Karen Do-Right.
And how are you employed?
I'm a deputy at the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been a deputy at the Orange County Sheriff's Department?
For the past 5 years.
And were you working on the early morning of March 1st, 2004?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Let me direct your attention to the early morning hour at approximately 1:30 a.m. on March 1st. Did anything unusual happen at this time, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. I was driving eastbound on State Road 50, and I noticed that there was a car going about 60 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour speed zone.
And did you eventually identify the driver of this car?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Do you see that person in this courtroom here today?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Can you please point her out and describe what she's wearing?
She's sitting over there. She has long auburn hair, a patterned top, and a black blazer.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness has correctly identified the defendant in this case.
The record will so reflect.
You were telling us that you identified the defendant driving at excessive rate of speed. Did you notice anything else unusual about the defendant's driving pattern?
Well, I observed that she was straddling the white line between the two lanes, and at one point, the back of her car almost hit the front of my car, and eventually she swerved into the right lane directly in front of my car.
Thank you. And what happened after that?
Well, I knew I was going to have to pull her over, so I called in her tag number and turned on my blue lights.
All right, and what happened after you turned on your blue lights?
I pulled over, I got out of my car, walked towards her car, and her music was playing so loudly I could barely hear myself think. So I pounded on her window, trying to get her attention, and after a minute she finally saw me and rolled down her window. And that's when I ordered her to turn off her music so I could talk to her.
And did she do that?
Yes, ma'am, she did.
What did you do after that?
Then I asked the defendant for her driver's license and registration. I also noticed that her eyes were kind of glassy and bloodshot.
And did she immediately give you her driver's license and registration?
No, ma'am. At first, she said that she was really tired and she stayed up too late studying for exams she had that day. And then she handed me her social security card instead of her driver's license.
All right, and what did you do after she gave you the wrong form of identification?
Well, when I was standing at the car, I smelled the odor of alcohol, so I asked her to step out of the car. And in doing so, she was kind of unsteady. And finally, when she was standing on her feet, she was kind of swaying, and she finally gave me her driver's license. I then told her that I had pulled her over because of the way she was driving, and now I was concerned about the odor of alcohol I was smelling.
All right, and did you ask the defendant to take any tests?
I asked her to take the field sobriety test. At that point, she said, okay, I had 2 beers with my boyfriend to celebrate the Orlando High School basketball victory, and then she agreed that she would take the field sobriety test.
Okay, Deputy, would you briefly describe to the jury what field sobriety tests are?
These tests are designed to determine whether someone is impaired or not. They test the person's ability to listen to instructions and to perform divided attention tasks. Where we were outside the car. The ground we were standing on was pretty level and well lit, so I could see what she was doing. For the one-legged test, she was to stand on one leg with her arms hanging loosely by her side. She was to look down at her feet and count to 30 in thousands. And I told her not to hop or sway and not to stop until she had completed the test.
And how did the defendant perform these tests?
She didn't start counting out loud until she got to 12. And she was also hopping and swaying. And by the time she got to 17, she had put her foot down several times.
And was this in accordance with your instructions?
No, ma'am. As I said earlier, she wasn't supposed to hop or sway, which she did anyway, and she was supposed to count out loud, which she did not.
And what did you do after you had the defendant perform these tests?
I gave her the second test, the alphabet test. I told her that she was to say the alphabet, not sing it, but she sang it anyway. So then I arrested her for driving under the influence of alcohol, and I took her to the breath testing center.
And are you trained to administer a breath test?
Yes, ma'am, I am. I took a 40-hour course, and I have administered over 100 breath tests in my career.
And was the machine in working order that night?
Yes, but the defendant refused to take a breath test. She said that she didn't trust her fate to a machine that she had heard was faulty.
And did you tell the defendant that if she refused to take the breath test, her license would be suspended for a year?
Yes, ma'am, but she said she would rather lose her license than be falsely convicted by a machine that she had heard things about.
Okay, Deputy, one last thing. Did you find anything suspicious in the defendant's car?
Yes, ma'am. In the back, I found 4 empty beer cans and 1 unopened beer can that was still cold and wet to the touch.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
You stated that you smelled the odor of alcohol on my client's breath, correct?
Yes, I did.
Yet you cannot determine how much alcohol my client consumed, correct?
No, I can't.
All right, when you asked my client to turn down the volume, which was admittedly very loud, she did so without question and without an argument, correct?
Yes, she did.
And isn't it also true that my client was nervous when you pulled her over?
I don't know whether she was nervous or if she was just impaired by the alcohol.
Let me rephrase the question. You've made a number of traffic stops over the course of your career, yes?
Yes.
In your experience, people occasionally weave in and out of their lane without having anything to drink, correct?
Sometimes.
And people also speed without having anything to drink, correct?
Yes.
And did you ask my client why she was weaving?
No, I didn't.
My client didn't try to elude from you or flee from you, correct?
No, she didn't.
And she was cooperative and polite, correct?
Yes, she was.
And she told you that she was tired from studying for a test all night, correct?
Yes.
And you're saying that my client had balance issues with the tests that you gave her, correct?
Yes, she did.
Wouldn't you say that fatigue could adversely affect balance?
Yes.
Wouldn't you also say that nervousness could also affect balance?
I guess so.
My client's eyes appeared glassy and bloodshot, yes?
Yes.
Wouldn't you agree that fatigue and lack of sleep could cause glassy and bloodshot eyes?
Yes.
So you can't say for sure that all these things you talked about were because my client was alcoholically impaired or because she was simply very, very tired.
No, I can't. But in my professional opinion, it was the alcohol that impaired her. If she had submitted to the breath test, we would have more evidence.
Well, didn't my client ask for a blood test?
Yes, she did, but we are not equipped to administer a blood test.
I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy. You may step down. State, you may call your next witness.
No, Your Honor. State rests.
Ladies and gentlemen, normally certain motions would be made outside of the presence of the jury. However, to save time, we're going to move on with the defense's case. Defense, please call your first witness.
I call the defendant in this case.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Jane Jones.
How old are you, Jane?
I'm 18 years of age.
Do you attend school?
Yes, I do. I'm a student at Orlando High School.
What grade are you in?
I'm in the 12th grade.
I would like to bring your attention to the early morning hours of March 1st, 2004. Do you remember that day?
I sure do.
Okay, now going back to the day previous to that, February 28th, 2004. Do you remember how much sleep you got that night?
I was up really late studying for an important test. I went to sleep around 2 a.m. and woke up at 6 a.m. in order for me to get to school on time.
And how did school go that day?
I had that important test that I had to take, and then after school, I attended a couple of club activities, and then later on I went to the basketball game.
How did you get to the basketball game?
I drove the family car.
And who did you drive with?
I drove with my boyfriend. I picked him up at his house.
And where does he live?
He lives near downtown Orlando.
So what happened after the game?
You see, we won the game and everyone was celebrating since they were our rivals. So we went out to eat, and then afterwards I brought him back home and we just kind of hung out for a little bit, and then I left.
Prior to leaving, did you have anything to drink?
Yes, we both did. I had 2 beers and he had 1.
And where did you get these beers?
From his refrigerator.
So what time did you leave his house?
I left his house around 1:15 a.m.
And how were you feeling when you were about to leave?
I was really tired and I didn't want to fall asleep or get into an accident, so I turned up the air conditioning as high as I could and I blasted the radio as loud as I could, and then I started to drive home.
And anything unusual happen?
Yes, well, my playlist had just finished playing, so I went to go change the song, and as I did that, my iPod fell onto the floor, and when I went to go pick it up, I guess I might have swerved a little bit.
So what happened after you swerved?
I saw that there was a deputy behind me with the blue flashing lights on, so I pulled over immediately.
And what happened after you pulled over?
Well, I remember the deputy came up to my car and knocked on my car window and instructed me to turn my music down, which I did right away. And then she asked me for my license.
Did you give it to her?
I remember I was reaching for my registration, and then I went into my wallet to grab my license. I guess I pulled the card that was right behind it, which was my Social Security card.
And what happened after that?
Then she instructed me to get outside of the vehicle and asked me for my license again. I looked back in my wallet and realized that I had given her the wrong card, so then I gave her my license. And then she told me that she suspected me of drinking and driving.
And what did you do at this point?
Then the police deputy told me that I had to stand on one leg and count, and then she showed me how to do so, and I thought I did fine.
And what happened after you finished the test?
Well, then the deputy told me that I was under arrest, and she put me inside of her vehicle and handcuffed me. Then she told me she was going to take me to this place where I had to breathe into this machine. I refused because my friend Josh told me that these machines were really unreliable, so I asked them to drop blood on me instead.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you one last time. How much did you have to drink that day?
Honestly, I had 2 beers only, and that was it.
Why were there 4 empty beer cans in your car?
Well, I recycle, so I took the empty beer cans from my boyfriend's house. 2 of them were my empty beer cans. One was his empty beer can, and then the other one we got from his garage.
Okay, and then what about the unopened can?
Well, he didn't like the beer that we were drinking, so he told me to just bring it home to my dad instead.
Were you intoxicated so that the faculties to operate an automobile were impaired?
No, I was not intoxicated, much less impaired. I know that I wasn't drunk. All I had was 2 beers at my boyfriend's house, and that was it. And plus, the night before, I was just so tired from staying up and studying for that important test. And I was so nervous and embarrassed because here was the deputy and all the blue flashing lights were going around and everything.
No further questions. Your witness.
First, you admit that you had something to drink the night in question, don't you?
Yes.
And you also admit that you were driving in Orange County, Florida on March 1st after you had something to drink.
Yes.
You were going 60 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone when you were stopped.
I don't remember if I was going too fast or not, but I just remember that I was in a rush to get home.
When you got to the breath test center, you refused to take a breath test because you know you were over the legal limit. Isn't that true?
No, that is 100% incorrect. Machines make mistakes all the time. I refuse to put my freedom in the hands of a machine.
And how old were you on March 1st, 2004?
18.
And are you aware of the legal drinking age in the state of Florida?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think it's 21.
That's right, it's 21 years old. But on March 1st, 2004, when you were 18 years old, you had 2 beers at your boyfriend's house. Isn't that true?
Yes, I already told you that.
And it wasn't legal for you to have a beer on the night, was it, ma'am?
Well, I guess not.
You guess not. It was illegal for you to drink on March 1st, 2004.
If you say so.
So you know when you were drinking that beer that you did something wrong. Isn't that correct?
I guess so, yeah.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
State, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Defense, do you have any other witnesses?
No further witnesses, Your Honor. Defense rests.
We would normally have closing arguments now, followed by some jury instructions, and then we'd turn the case over to you to make a decision. Before you could find the defendant guilty of driving while under the influence, the state must prove the following 3 elements: that the defendant drove or was in actual physical control of a vehicle in Florida, that the defendant was under the influence of alcoholic beverages, and that the defendant was affected to the extent that her normal faculties were impaired. Normal faculties are those faculties of a person, such as the ability to walk, talk, judge distances, drive an automobile, make judgments, act in emergency situations, and in general, to normally perform the many mental and physical acts of our daily lives. A reasonable doubt is not a possible doubt, speculative doubt, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such doubt must not influence you to render a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. Your duty is to determine if the defendant is guilty or not guilty in accordance with the law. It is the judge's job to determine what a proper sentence would be if the defendant is found guilty. Your verdict must be unanimous, that is, each juror must agree to the same verdict. This is our system of justice. This is where we strive to uphold the law. Whatever your decision may be in this case, it is important that we all govern ourselves in accordance with the law, because the stakes are very high.
Right now on Fox 35 News at 6.
Tonight, a young mother killed. Her husband is critically injured after troopers say that a drunk driver slammed into their car. Good evening, I'm Bob Fryer.
I'm Sunny Abada. The crash happened as the couple was heading home from a movie. Fox 35's Holly Bristow has more.
Investigators tell me that the couple was sitting in their car right here at this intersection at a red light when Alejandro Carrea slammed right into the back of him. Troopers tell me that Carrea was so drunk he doesn't even remember the accident. This is what's left of the young couple's Toyota Corolla. The rear end of the car crunched up to the front seat. Troopers say 24-year-old Giselle Batista died on impact. Her husband, Benjamin Frias, is in extremely critical condition. According to investigators, 20-year-old Alejandro Carrea was speeding when he slammed his Dodge Charger into the back of the couple's car, sending it 180 feet past the intersection. And troopers say he was drunk.
20 years old, he should have never had an ounce of alcohol in him.
Investigators say Carrea was so drunk that when they questioned him at the hospital, he didn't remember what happened.
The driver told the trooper he did not even know he'd been involved in a crash. He thought he had actually been stopped by the trooper on a traffic stop.
24-year-old Giselle Batista was killed. Her 30-year-old husband, Benjamin Frias, was in critical condition.
Giselle was my sister. Ben was my brother-in-law. They got married in September 2012. We were 4 sisters. Now we're 3. Ben had 3 brothers, and he was always smiling, making the best out of things. Anything that she wanted him to do, he would.
He was my third one. And he was very close to me from the 4 of them. And he has a lot of plans with his wife and his son. He wanted to buy a house. He wanted to do a lot of things in life, like have his own business and have more children.
She worked at Walgreens, recently graduated for software engineering, and Ben had his real estate license working in sales for Disney. My nephew Emmanuel was born in January 12th. The moment that Emmanuel was born, it was like the happiest time for them. They had a monthly date night that my mother would watch the baby or I would watch the baby. I wasn't here that last Sunday that they were living. On June 3rd, 2013, I was on vacation. To my impression, I was like, well, let me enjoy one last day at the beach.
But that night, I was kind of uncomfortable in my bed. I couldn't sleep, and I didn't know why.
And then the state trooper looks at me and he tells me direct to my face, unfortunately, your sister Giselle Batista was hit by a drunk driver. He was underage, and unfortunately, she did not make it out this accident.
And then in the morning, when I got that call,
my sister's looking on Instagram to kind of see who said happy birthday to her. And as I'm in the water, I look at her to make sure she's okay, and she is like, get out, you need to get out. At that point, I'm thinking, oh, something happened to my dad, because he's sick.
They said that they seen a car accident, that she had passed away. I couldn't believe it. So I started calling her phone, blowing up her phone, like, Giselle, please pick up the phone.
As I'm running to see what's going on, I'm like, man, I hope nothing happens to Giselle and Ben. And she, surely enough, shows me a picture and tell me this is not true. And it was a picture of my sister. And it said, God took another angel. Rest in peace.
Then after that, I went to the hospital and I went to see how Ben was doing because I already lost my sister. So I was like, let me just see how Ben is doing, because this is Emmanuel's hope. This is Emmanuel's only parent. And I went to the hospital and I went in a wheelchair because I couldn't even walk because my head was going to explode. I get there and I see everybody there. All his cousins were outside of the door of this hospital in the ICU. And then they were crying. They saw me. They started crying on me.
The nurse told me that there was no way that he will make it because he would brain dead. God granted me that moment to go and to be able to see him for the last time.
My sister died at impact, and Ben died a couple of hours later. He was pronounced brain dead.
You're just involved in the fact that there's two people that are just not in your life anymore when they were just there the day before. You know, and as we're there and we're watching the news and, you know, and we learn that it was a drunk driver and the kid gets released from jail and they say, you know, what do you have to say to the families that are grieving for what you did? And he's like, just mumbling, I'm sorry. And his mother tells him to be quiet.
To find out that he was 20 years old and seeing the news article and him coming out of jail and saying I'm so sorry, walking perfectly fine, was like, wow. I guess the innocent people is the one that dies here. Because why not him? He was the one doing something wrong. They weren't.
You know, there are no words to express what that action has done to our family, because it's not just impacting the two people that passed away. It's impacting the child that's left without parents for no reason, just because of somebody else's decision.
He started walking at 10 months, giving his first steps at 9. Has about 12 teeth now. When he was 8 months, he was 8 teeth. He's in daycare, and my sister wanted him to go to daycare at 1. I respected her wishes, and he just smiles. Like, he'll wake up and touch my face, and it's kind of like, it's 7:30, I'm up, you to take care of me now. So nobody will replace his parents. I don't know how it is when he gets older and he starts asking me questions on how I can say it and what my response would be, but I guess God will give me the strength. That way he knows why his mother and father passed away. My mom has a photo of his second or 3 months that they took their first family portrait, and she placed it on top of our family room's television. And if he would see any picture and you would tell him, Emmanuel, where's mommy? He would go to the picture and he would point her out. And then we tell him, Emmanuel, where's papi? he'll go to the picture and point him out. How did it feel to sing happy birthday to him and not have my sister there? There's no words. To have people that knew her well and I didn't know so well, and to say, wow, you guys did an awesome job. This party came out really good. In heaven, your sister's so proud. But what wouldn't I give to have them there? To have them sing happy birthday to their son. My best advice to anybody, not that if you're underage, even worse, but my best advice to anybody is to, if you're gonna drink, find a driver. Call somebody. Because the life you take may not be your own.
You know, as a young adult, I remember the days that my parents would be like, stay home, don't go out, don't drink, you're underage, you shouldn't be drinking. You know, and you do things carelessly, not because you're maliciously trying to hurt, but you're just not thinking of the decision that you're actually making, or you think that's never gonna happen to me. That's never gonna happen to me. I wouldn't get that far. And you just don't know.
So if you're in a party, if you're having fun with friends, have a limit. Have one drink, stay home, just control your drinking. It's not worth it. You're hurting family, you're hurting friends, you're hurting everybody. And it's not worth it.
This is what happens when somebody don't take responsibility for their actions. And when you drink and drive, you don't know what's gonna happen.
And I just want all the young kids to know that the drinking and driving, it kills. And it's not something that he wanted to do. He did not go out to the streets because he wanted to kill two people. I feel sorry for him and his family as well.
Think twice. You have so many options. You can call someone, you can call a cab, you can designate who's gonna be the designated driver before you leave, and people think that's stupid, we wanna have fun and we wanna do whatever, but you don't know what that may cause you. Would it be your family member that you're no longer seeing, your mom and dad that have been taken away from you, your brother or sister, your cousin or a friend, or anybody?
It was like part of my heart was gone, and part of my heart is still gone, because nobody in this world will ever replace my little sister.
You changed someone's life. What do you have to say to that family?
For yourself.
I feel awful. I'm very